Hi, everybody. Welcome to Habitat Demos for Friday, November 17th. We have a bunch of really cool demos for you today, starting with Matt showing some work for Windows container support. So take it away, Matt.
All right. So yeah. So yesterday we released 0.39.0, and so with that, we now have a new Windows Studio style, a new mode that you can run the Windows Studio. So I'm gonna actually go do a Hab Studio enter here real quick, because this is gonna take a little while. I'll explain why it takes a little while in just a little bit. But anyway, so up to now, the Windows Studio experience is basically a local studio, and we've done our best to make it isolated, but it's not completely isolated. So we trim your path. We kind of, we carve out an area in the file system for where you can actually run Habitat and run the supervisor. But the fact of the matter is you can still easily navigate outside of that file system area and taint files outside. There's still just one registry, so whatever registry, whatever the Windows registry settings are affected outside the studio, you're going to have that same Windows registry on the inside of the studio. So what we've done now is, if you're running on Windows 10 or Windows Server 2016, basically the bottom line is you have to have Hyper-V enabled for this to work. That's the case also if you want to use the Docker Studio for Linux as well. But at any rate, so if you're on those platforms and you are running in, I'm going to call it Windows container mode. So basically, if you look here, so here's my Docker settings. You can see here it says switch to Linux containers. If I were to click on that, then it would toggle to switch to Windows containers. So chances are most people are running Linux containers, so this would actually say switch to Windows containers. So if you are running Windows containers, we will detect that when you type Hab Studio enter, and rather than bringing up a local studio, the one that I just mentioned, will actually bring up a container, and that's what you're looking at right here. I'm actually running inside of a container. So name of my computer is Service Rock, and typically that's what I would see, in or out of the container, but now in or out of the studio. But now, because I'm in a container, just to prove this, computer name is that is not my local host name. That's the name of my container. So now I have, I can run services in here and not worry about them conflicting with ports. On my local machine, I've got a clean, pristine Windows registry. I still have, we still do the mount. So, here this is bound to the same, the same directory from which I entered the studio. So the container that we're running is based off of Microsoft's server core container. So it's not a nano container. The reason, and we did that for very specific reasons. Well, a nano container is great and it's tiny. The problem is that there's a lot of types of applications that people might want to use with Habitat that won't run inside of nano. So like .NET Core apps run great in there. But straight up .NET apps and other stuff, there's just too much unpredictability. And in the future, we might add an option to actually start up a container in nano mode, which I think would be great. But as a first swag on this, we're using server, just the base server core. Which, to be aware of this, so we're going to have a blog post that talks about a lot of these caveats today. But one thing to be aware of is that container, the features, so like for example, IIS is turned off. It basically only has critical features, but that's actually a good thing, because what you want in your studio is a very minimal instance, and you want it to match up with what you're going to have at runtime. And so there's no guarantee at runtime that you're going to have these features enabled. So what I would encourage Windows plan writers to do is, in your init scripts, check for the features that you want running, and if those features aren't running, then enable them in your init script. So that's one way to tackle that, and we'll have some examples coming out in future blog posts on actually doing that. So that's that's Windows containers. I'm just going to mention a few things here real quick, just to be aware that might catch you by surprise, because they've caught me by surprise. So I use ConEMU for my console. A lot of people out there might as well. I have problems running, and this isn't Habitat specific, just I have problems running Windows containers under Docker run in that console. Just the shell behavior is very weird. The arrow keys don't work. I've done some Googling. I haven't really found much, so we might dive into that a little later on and try and fix that. But right now I'm running just the stock cmd.exe. That works great. So does the stock PowerShell console. So you might have a better experience there than something like ConEMU or Console 2 or Console Z, or some of the other alternate consoles out there. The other thing to be aware of is that because by default, at least on Windows 10, these run in what's called Hyper-V isolation mode. They basically start up a very small VM. That's one reason. So the startup time is going to be impacted. So it's actually starting up a VM and booting into that Windows image. So that's kind of a bummer, because it does take a little bit to start up. As you saw just now, it took quite a while. I think that's because I've got Hangouts running in the background. But the default memory footprint there is 1 gig. So there might be stuff that you're doing inside the studio that might need more than a gig, and you might start getting out of memory exceptions. Check out the blog post, hopefully coming out later today, and you'll see how to configure that to get more memory if necessary. I think lastly, the very first time, especially if you've never used Windows containers on your machine before, the very first time you'll pull this down is going to take a very long time, because the base container is about 5 gigs. Now, that should never, once you pull that down, that should last you until Habitat uses a different base container. So it's a one-time shot experience, but that first time is 5 gigs, and it may take a good while on your machine. So, anyways, that's it. Check it out. I hope that this is going to provide a better, certainly much more isolated Windows Studio experience.
That looks great, Matt. This has been a long time coming. It's awesome to see Studio running fully end-to-end on Windows. I think that'll make for some happy users out there. Okay, let's switch to Elliot with some more container magic with ECR export. So,
yeah, I'm really hoping that the demo gods are going to be on my side today. So this is the Builder UI screen that you all know and love. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through the full, this is how you set up the ECR integration. So the first thing that we want to do is head over to the integrations tab in our origin, and you'll notice a new button is there for Amazon Container Registry. We'll give it a name and a registry URL, which I will get from here. So this is an ECR. This is the step that you would go through to set up your container registry for Amazon. So that's the private URL that we have. And then I'm going to flip over and get my IAM credentials. Something to note here is that we can currently validate your Docker Hub credentials, but we don't currently validate your IAM credentials. So if you copy and paste those wrong, or you have a poor memory and you're pasting a hash key, then you might get that wrong, and we don't actually validate it yet. So cool, now it's there, so we can head back over to packages, and we'll go into the normal steps of connect to plan file. I'm going to connect to core plans. And let's build Elasticsearch and enable push to, I also haven't updated the UI here yet, but it'll push to Amazon Container Registry. And the repo name was Elasticsearch. That is also defined here. So, yep, that should be all good there. And then you can see that our integration is configured. We can come over to build jobs now and kick off a build job, and that will spawn a worker for us. And this is going to take, I think the Elasticsearch build from nothing takes about 2 minutes. So we can either switch off and I can come back, or we can watch the build fail. This is a fresh VM, so I might have misconfigured it. But
Yeah,
anyway,
that is awesome. This is currently running on your dev environment, so we haven't gone live with it.
yeah, and that's sort of the problem. Is I pieced together a lot of PRs to kind of get this working. So I can let me relinquish, and I will maybe I'll relinquish. How do I relinquish? Oh, stop
Yeah,
sharing. There we go.
we can come back if that completes, and we can
Yeah.
look at the rest of it. But this is huge. It's going to be awesome to be able to get the builds exported to ECR.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah. I'll let you know if it finishes by the end of the demos.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go to Neil, who has some more work with node scaffolding.
Hello. Excuse me. Hello. I'm going to share my screen first this time, so you're not staring at my face. All right. So some functionality we've added to node scaffolding recently is the ability to use it with Angular. And the demo I put together today and a blog post that should be coming out later today is around using it with Angular Seed. Now, if any of you all watching at home are thinking, but Angular said we should use Angular CLI now, that is correct, but Habitat is also meant to help you package legacy applications, not just new applications. So if you have an application that needs to use Angular Seed for whatever reason, you can now package it with Habitat. So let's go on over to the demo. I'm going to go over to my terminal here. Let's up the text just a hair. So over here on the left, you can see what I've done is I've cloned this repo, Angular Seed. I can then add whatever I want to it. And in order to habitize it, I created a habitat plan. And the only thing I need to add in is the package service user is root. This is due to an existing bug in the supervisor that sometimes changes the ownership of certain directories that are needed by this scaffolding. So for right now, you need to include the package service user as root. And I'm going to do this cooking show style. I've already packaged and exported this to a Docker container. So let's go ahead and run it. And there'll be full instructions on how to do this in the upcoming blog post. And it'll take just a second to start on up. Do-do-do-do-do. All right, let's give this 10 more seconds. There we go. So it's now running on my local host in port 555. So let's go on over to that and let's see it running. So I've got my default Angular Seed application here, and I've got a list of awesome computer scientists. Do I know any others? Let's put in computer from War Games, because why not? So let's add that in, and there it is. So that's all it takes to get a running Angular app with Habitat. And let me go ahead and unshare my screen. And let's go meta. And back to you, Salim.
That is awesome. Thank you, Neil. That looks great. Cool. Let's go to the last demo. I'm going to do a quick one here. Let me share my screen. And what I'm going to show is some improvements to the builder job promote CLI command. So let's first type it out. Builder job promote. And so this command is for promoting a group of jobs. When we have builder do these builds, we have sometimes a lot of these build packages, but they'll be sitting in some specific channel. And if you want to promote them to something like stable, then this command can really help do that. So there's a couple of new things that you'll notice here. One is this interactive flag. And then there's another new one is this verbose flag. So what this lets us do is, let's say you have a lot of different packages. You don't want to promote all of them. For some reason, you want to skip some of them. Previously, there was no way to do that. So now with the interactive flag, you can actually do an edit to your list of successfully built packages, and then pick and choose from those and promote them. So I already have a build. It's a small build that I've done before, and I'm going to do this with interactively. So this is this number is the build group job. If you look at some of your builds in the web UI, you can see that there's a builder dash set of numbers. This is that number. That's the group job ID. So I'm gonna do this. And now it comes up inside my editor, and it says, there's some instructions at the top, and I only had one test build here, but I could let's assume that there could be multiple ones here. I could delete them, the ones that I didn't want to promote, and I couldn't add any that would be promoted that were not part of the original build. I mean, I could add them here, but they would get ignored. So I'm going to now just save this file, and now I've saved it, and it gives me another prompt just to verify that I want to do the promotion, and I can say yes, and it then does the promotion, and it's all done successfully. If I had a lot of packages, another thing I could do is I could say add the verbose command here, and then I do the same thing. Let's say I'm just gonna, for the sake of it, um, make 10 copies of it, whatever, and save it. And now it'll actually print out just to confirm all of these ones that are going to be promoted at this point. So I'm just gonna say no here, but it lets you kind of look at the verbose view as well. So that's the demo for Hab Builder Job Promote, and that's the last demo for us. So unless there's anybody else that has a walk-in, this is the end of demos today. Hope you've all enjoyed watching, and we will see you next week.